While I was away on business, my parents sold my dream home to pay for my brother's luxury vacation. When I returned, my dad sneered, "Your house covered their fun." I just grinned. "What's so funny?" he barked. I said, "The home you sold was." You know that feeling when your entire world gets ripped out from under you in a single, gut-wrenching moment? That's what happened to me. I came home from a 6-week business trip, ready to step back into the craftsman house I'd poured my heart and soul into, only to be hit with a betrayal so deep, so cold, it shattered everything I thought I knew about family. My parents looked me dead in the eye and said, "Your house?" Yeah, that paid for it all. They'd sold my home, my dream, to fund their lavish indulgences and my lazy brother's fantasies. What they didn't know, though, was that my grandfather had planned for exactly this kind of treachery. And they had just triggered a clause that would wipe out their entire inheritance. My name's Garrett Miller, I'm 34, an international marketing consultant. I've been independent since I was 18, hustling to make my own way out of a middle-class home in Pasadena. I don't usually dwell on the past, but to understand this story, you need to know about my family, where love always seemed to tilt in one direction. My parents, Robert and Linda, were pretty ordinary. Dad worked at a bank, Mom was an accountant. They had a modest house, a minivan, a stable life on the surface. But inside? It was anything but. I have a younger brother, Brian, for years my junior. And from the moment he could walk, I felt the stark difference in how we were treated. Brian was the golden boy. Lazy, couldn't hold a job for more than 6 months, but my parents constantly sheltered him, made excuses. Brian's still finding his way. My mother would coo, even after he quit his 5th job because his boss didn't understand him. Meanwhile, I put myself through college, juggling 3 jobs, waiting tables, delivering packages, working as an office assistant, just to graduate debt-free. I never resented it. I believed in hard work. And I had one person who always, truly believed in me, my grandfather, Norman. Grandpa was my rock. A tough man with rough, calloused hands from construction, but a heart of pure gold. He'd sit with me on the porch, telling stories of how he built his life from nothing. "Your strength is your true asset," he'd say in his deep, steady voice. "Money, houses, cars, they're just tools. But your will, Garrett, that's something no one can take away." Those words became my guiding light through those exhausting years. When he passed at 18, he left me a trust fund. I could access part of it at 25 if I proved myself worthy. And I did. After 7 relentless years of work, I used a portion of that trust as a down payment on an old craftsman house in the Pasadena suburbs. It wasn't a mansion, nothing flashy, but it was everything to me. My dream. A single-story wooden home with a wide porch, stained glass windows, a small backyard garden. It was old, it needed work, but I loved every crack in the hardwood floors, every chipped brick in the fireplace. I spent months fixing it up myself, sanding, repainting, replacing windows. I even planted a rose garden, a tribute to my grandmother who adored roses. Standing there, breathing in their sweet scent, I felt her presence, her smile. But my parents and Brian? They never understood. To them, it was just a pile of old wood. The kitchen's outdated, the walls are peeling. It's a waste of money to fix, my mother once scoffed. Brian was worse. He called me crazy for investing in a chicken coop when I could have bought a modern downtown apartment. I just smiled. They didn't get it. That house wasn't just a place to live, it was a monument to my fight, the sleepless nights, the times I pushed myself to be stronger. It represented the difference between Brian and me. While I scraped every penny to buy my house, Brian was handed everything. A new car, pocket money, credit card debt paid off by my father. I wasn't jealous, but the unfairness was a constant, low thrum. I did everything right, but every time I visited home, I'd hear about Brian's new opportunities or how he was about to do something big. Brian's big moment never came. I remember one dinner right after I'd been promoted at my consulting firm. Brian, once again fired, was complaining. "My boss didn't know how to use me," he grumbled, beer in hand, glaring at me. "Not everyone's as lucky as you, Garrett, always having everything handed to you." I was stunned. Lucky me? The one who worked himself to exhaustion? I just ate my dinner in silence. Arguing was pointless. Everything changed when I got a huge opportunity, a 6-week international consulting project in Europe, London, and Frankfurt. It was career-defining. Thrilled, but anxious about leaving my house empty, I asked my parents to look after it. Just stop by, check the locks, water the rose garden. Simple, right? But as I handed the key to my father, a strange, cold dread crept into my heart. Like I was entrusting a piece of my soul to someone who didn't truly value it. The last dinner before my flight was at their house. I walked in, trying to be light, but the familiar atmosphere hit me. Mom bustling, Dad watching football, Brian, phone in hand, complaining about work sucking. My boss keeps giving me pointless tasks. I can't waste my youth. I bit my tongue. I started talking about my project, international marketing, major corporation, promotion on the line. But my mother's eyes drifted to Brian, as if he was the one who needed attention. Brian's considering a new job, she interrupted, beaming. A tech startup. Very promising. I paused, my steak suddenly unappetizing. Brian, who couldn't hold a job for 6 months, had a promising opportunity. I looked at him. He just shrugged, eyes glued to his phone. Maybe, he mumbled. But it's stressful. I need a break first. A break? You've been on a break your whole life. My father, usually quiet, spoke up. Garrett, you're going away for so long. What about your house? I jumped on the change of subject. Can you and Mom look after it? Just check the doors, water the plants. I'll leave the key. I pulled it from my pocket, placing it on the table. He nodded, but his eyes were distant. All right. Then he turned back to the TV. My mother patted Brian's shoulder. My boy needs to relax. Work's so stressful, isn't it? A heat rose in my chest. Stressful? Brian didn't know what stress was. He lived off their money while I paid for everything, from college to every single brick in my house. But I said nothing. I'd learned. I stood up, thanked Mom, and handed the key to Dad directly. I'm off. Say hi to Brian for me when he looks up from his phone. Brian just glared. The next day, I was on a flight to London. Looking out the window, I pictured my rose garden, vibrant under the California sun. Everything will be fine, I told myself. They'll look after it. But deep down, a small voice warned me I'd just made a grave mistake. London was a whirlwind of drizzle and frenetic pace. I threw myself into work, late-night meetings, endless revisions, presentations. I loved the challenge, the chance to prove myself. Every night, back in my cold hotel room, I'd dream of returning home, sitting on my porch, gazing at my rose garden. Around the 3rd week, Brian sent me a message. Not a check-in, just an Instagram link. I opened it and felt a punch to the gut. A series of photos. Brian in the Maldives, white sandy beaches, crystal clear infinity pools, a luxurious bungalow. He was grinning next to a girl I'd never seen. Caption: Paradise found. Need more days like this. I sat there, staring at my phone. The Maldives? Where did he get the money? He'd just lost his job, had piles of credit card debt. My parents weren't rich enough for this. I texted back, looks nice. Who are you with? No reply. Called Mom, no answer. Called Dad, straight to voicemail. Unease began to settle in. I'm overthinking it, I told myself. Maybe he borrowed money, or won the lottery. But I knew deep down, something was wrong. The image of Brian in the Maldives haunted me. I started checking his Instagram obsessively. Each post was a fresh stab, seafood dinners, expensive cocktails, a photo on a yacht with that smug grin. How? Brian had no money. My parents couldn't afford this. Could they? I called home more often. Everything's fine, Garrett, Mom would say in brief, strained calls. Your house is fine. Don't worry. Dad was even briefer, busy. Talk later. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. But every night, lying in that hotel bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was unfolding behind my back. 6 weeks in Europe passed in a blur. The project was a resounding success, executives shaking my hand, promising a higher position. But that joy couldn't dispel the growing dread. Brian's photos, my parents' evasiveness, puzzle pieces I couldn't quite fit together. All I wanted was to go home, step into my craftsman house, sit on my porch, look at my rose garden. I wanted the peace I'd spent my youth building. The plane landed in Los Angeles. I took a deep breath, trying to push away the dark thoughts. "Everything will be fine," I whispered, though my voice wasn't convincing. I took a taxi to my parents' house to get my key. On the way, I checked Brian's Instagram one last time. His latest post made my blood run cold. A selfie, Brian, smug grin, standing in front of a shiny new SUV. "Welcome to the new ride," the caption read. My heart pounded. Brian didn't have money for a car. So where did this come from? As the taxi pulled up to my parents' house, another detail hit me like a physical blow. Parked in the driveway was a brand new sedan, gleaming under the California sun. Not Brian's SUV, but another expensive car. I stepped out, gripping my phone, feeling a boulder pressing down on my shoulders. My father appeared at the front door, wearing a new shirt. His eyes were cold, emotionless. "Come in, Garrett," he said, his voice low, devoid of warmth. "We need to talk." I stepped inside. The air was heavy, like the calm before a storm. My mother sat at the dining table, hands clasped tightly, eyes fixed on the floor. Brian wasn't there, but his presence hung heavy, a dark shadow. I set my suitcase down, trying to keep my voice steady. "Where's my house key, Dad?" The look in their eyes told me the answer wouldn't be simple. My mother looked up, her lips pressed thin, her voice trembling. "Garrett, your house. We sold it." The world stopped. My ears rang. "Sold?" I repeated, my voice a whisper. "Sold my house? What do you mean?" My mother looked away. My father crossed his arms, his voice firm. "We needed the money, Garrett. Brian needed a fresh start. He deserved to enjoy himself a little. And I needed a new car." I stared at him, feeling like I was looking at a stranger. "My house," I said, my voice shaking with pure, unadulterated rage. "I spent my whole life buying it. Every dollar, every hour of work, every callus on my hands from fixing it up. You sold it, to buy a car for you and to pay for Brian's Maldives trip." I was almost shouting now, but my father just shrugged, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "You're always fine, Garrett," he said. "You have a good job. You have money. Brian doesn't. He needs us." My blood boiled. Brian's 30 years old. He can't hold a job for more than 6 months, and you still coddle him like a child. I turned to my mother, desperate for some flicker of remorse, but she just pressed her lips together, muttering, "You don't understand, Garrett." Brian stressed. He needed a vacation to recharge. A vacation? I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and mocking. A vacation in the Maldives, at a 5-star resort, with his girlfriend and friends. "And you sold my house to pay for that? To buy new cars?" I stepped forward, grabbing my mother's hand, searching for a glimmer of hope that this was all a misunderstanding. But her eyes told me everything, the cold, undeniable truth. My craftsman house, where I'd poured my sweat and tears, where I'd planted a rose garden for my grandmother, was gone. It belonged to someone else. My father opened a drawer, pulled out a stack of crumpled bills, and tossed them onto the table. "This is what's left after we sold the house." Looking at that pathetic pile of cash, I nearly lost it. I stormed out, leaving the key, the money, everything. I refused to hear another word. I took a taxi to my house, or what used to be my house. When it stopped, my heart felt like it was being crushed. The stained glass windows were still there, but the curtains had changed. My rose garden looked different, unevenly trimmed. I stood at the gate and saw them, an elderly couple watering plants. The woman looked up and smiled. "Hello," she said, friendly. "Can I help you?" My throat was bone dry. This was my house, I managed, my voice trembling. The man stopped watering, confusion clouding his face. "Your house? Are you Garrett? We bought this house a month ago from your parents. They said you'd moved abroad to live." I stumbled back, my mind reeling. They didn't just sell my house. They lied. Fabricated a story to justify their actions. I returned to the taxi, unsure what to do. I called David, my best friend from college, now a junior lawyer. "David, I need to see you right now," I choked out. We met at a coffee shop. I poured out the whole story, Brian's lavish trip, the new cars, the shattering truth about my house. Every word felt like a knife. David listened, brows furrowed, pensive. When I finished, he tapped his fingers on the table. "Garrett," he said, his voice low but steady. "Your house, it's not just personal property, is it? You mentioned using part of your grandfather's trust fund to buy it, right?" I nodded, a spark of light piercing the darkness. Grandpa Norman's trust fund. I'd used part of it for the down payment, and it was still tied to the trust. I was the primary trustee until I turned 35. "If your parents sold the house without your consent, that could be illegal," David said, his eyes lighting up. "But I'm not sure about the specific terms. You need to meet with Mr. Harrison, the lawyer handling the trust. He's experienced, fair. He can help you seek justice. But you'll need to gather evidence, documents, contracts, anything that proves they did this behind your back." My heart pounded. David's words were a lifeline in the storm. I vaguely remembered Grandpa talking about a protective clause, that anyone who intentionally misappropriated trust assets would forfeit their inheritance. "Do you think I have a chance?" I asked, my voice trembling. David gripped my shoulder, his gaze resolute. "Meet Mr. Harrison. Gather the evidence. I'm certain you have a strong case." I left the coffee shop, my mind a whirlwind, but with a flicker of hope. I hadn't just lost my house. I'd lost my sense of security, my trust in my family. But if David was right, if I could prove my parents and Brian had gone too far, I could reclaim what was mine. The image of my rose garden flashed in my mind, but it was overshadowed by my father's cold face, my mother's evasive eyes, and Brian's smug Instagram smile. I clenched my fists. They thought they could take everything and walk away unscathed. They were wrong. I would uncover the truth, and I would make them pay. I immediately called Mr. Harrison. His voice was as deep and calm as I remembered, but a hint of concern crept in when I told him I needed to see him right away. "Garrett, are you okay?" he asked. "No," I replied, my voice breaking. "I need your help. Something big has happened." We met at his office downtown. He stood from behind his desk, white hair, round glasses, looking like a character from a classic novel. He shook my hand, his eyes sharp but warm. "Sit down, Garrett. Tell me what's going on." I took a deep breath, trying to hold back the emotions. I told him everything, the Europe trip, Brian's Maldives photos, my father's new car, and the crushing shock that my parents had sold my Craftsman house. They said they needed the money for Brian, for his fresh start, I said, my voice trembling with anger. "But that was my house, Mr. Harrison. I used money from my grandfather's trust to buy it. How could they sell it without my permission?" Mr. Harrison listened, hand on his chin, his gaze never leaving mine. When I finished, he sat in silence, then walked to a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder, dark brown leather, Norman Miller Trust, embossed on the cover. "Garrett," he said, his voice low but weighty. "That house isn't just your personal property. It belongs to the trust, and you are the sole trustee until you turn 35. If your parents sold it without your permission, that's a serious matter." My heart pounded. A ray of light. "How serious, Mr. Harrison?" I whispered. He opened the folder, flipping to a highlighted paragraph. "Let me explain the trust clearly. When you turn 35, the trust's assets will be distributed as follows. Your parents, Robert and Linda Miller, each receive $500,000. Your brother, Brian Miller, also receives $500,000. You, Garrett, receive $1 million. Additionally, you have full access to that $1 million before you turn 35, as you did when you used part of it to buy the house. But your parents and brother can only receive their shares when you turn 35, and only if they comply with the trust's terms." I nodded, trying to process it all. "And if they don't comply?" I asked, sensing the answer was about to change everything. Mr. Harrison looked me straight in the eye, his gaze sharp as a blade. "There's a very clear clause in the trust, Garrett. Any beneficiary who forges, misappropriates, or sells trust assets without the trustee's consent, that's you, will immediately forfeit their inheritance. Not only do they lose their share, but they could also face legal consequences depending on the specifics of their actions." I sat there stunned. The ground beneath me felt like it was shifting. Forfeit their inheritance? My parents' $500,000, Brian's $500,000. All of it could vanish because of what they'd done. I remembered Grandpa's words, "Your strength is your true asset." Was this his way of protecting me? So, you're saying if I can prove they forged or misappropriated the house, they lose everything? I asked, my voice trembling not from fear, but from a strange, unsettling mix of pain and satisfaction. Mr. Harrison nodded. Exactly. But we need evidence, Garrett. Documents, contracts, signatures, anything that proves they acted behind your back. If they forged your signature or used illegal means to sell the house, we could not only recover the property, but also activate the forfeiture clause. He paused, looking at me with sympathetic eyes. But you need to prepare yourself. This isn't just a legal matter. This is your family. Family? The words stabbed at my heart. My parents, who had raised me, had become betrayers. Brian, the brother I'd once hoped would grow up, was part of this scheme. My eyes stung, but I refused to let tears fall. I understand, Mr. Harrison, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. What do I need to do next? He placed a hand on my shoulder, just like Grandpa used to. You need to gather evidence. Find out how they sold the house, who bought it, and how the paperwork was signed. If there's any sign of forgery, signatures, notarizations, anything, we'll have grounds to act. I'll support you every step of the way, from filing a lawsuit to enforcing the trust's clauses. But you have to be strong, Garrett. This won't be easy. I nodded. A surge of determination, stronger than ever before, rose within me. My craftsman house, the rose garden for my grandmother, the nights I'd stayed up working to build my life. They had taken it all, but I wouldn't let them win. I'll find the evidence, I said, my voice firm. And I'll take back what's mine. Leaving Mr. Harrison's office, I felt like I was stepping into a battle. The Pasadena sun still shone, but inside me, a storm raged. I pulled out my phone and texted David, "You were right. There's a protective clause in the trust. I'll need your help." I didn't know exactly where to start, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't stop until the truth was exposed. My parents, Brian, the times they made me feel like I wasn't good enough, wasn't worthy. They thought I'd stay silent, accept the loss. They didn't know I was Norman Miller's grandson, the man who taught me that true strength lies in will. And my will now was an unquenchable fire. I started at the most painful place, my craftsman house. I needed to speak to Ellen and George, the elderly couple who now live there. The last time, I'd just learned it was sold. Now I needed details, who they met, what the paperwork looked like, any clues. In the taxi, I clenched my fists, trying to suppress the heart-crushing feeling. The house appeared, familiar stained glass windows, the rose garden unevenly trimmed, like an unhealed wound. I knocked, heart pounding. Ellen opened the door, her friendly smile now tinged with worry. "Garrett, you're back," she said, her voice soft but tense, as if sensing I wasn't there for a friendly visit. "Come in." Inside, George was sitting, a newspaper in hand, his eyes fixed on me, wary. "Mr. Garrett," he said, putting the paper down. "What's new? Last time you mentioned something about the house. We're still not sure what's going on." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. "Ellen, George, I'm sorry to bother you again, but I need to know more about the sale. I believe my parents forged documents to sell this house. I need evidence to take back what's mine." Ellen and George exchanged glances. Then she stood and retrieved a stack of papers from a drawer. "We don't want to be caught up in any trouble," Ellen said, her voice low. Your parents and your brother, said you were moving abroad and needed to sell quickly. They brought a deed of transfer with your signature and notarized documents. We paid in cash, and everything was finalized in a few days." I held the papers, my heart racing. The sale contract was in my father's name, Robert Miller, with my purported signature on the deed of transfer. But it wasn't mine. It was close, very close, but there were shaky, uneven strokes, like someone had tried to mimic it. "This isn't my signature," I said, my voice catching. George frowned. They also provided a notarized document confirming everything was legal. We had no reason to suspect otherwise. I asked permission to photograph the documents, feeling like I'd found the first crucial piece of the puzzle. Ellen looked at me, her eyes full of concern. If you're telling the truth, we're victims too. We paid for the house, moved in. If something's wrong, we need to know. I nodded, promising to follow up. Leaving the house, I felt a mix of relief and simmering anger. My parents had forged my signature, but I needed more. Back at the temporary rental, I contacted David again. He agreed to help analyze the documents and suggested checking my parents' house for original paperwork. If they took original documents from your house, they might still have them, David advised. The thought of returning made me shudder, but I had no choice. One morning, I slipped into my parents' house, knowing they were out grocery shopping. Quietly, I opened their filing cabinet. Stacks of bills, contracts, insurance papers. My heart raced when I found a folder labeled Garrett's House. Inside was the treasure I needed. Copies of the deed of transfer, notarized documents, and handwritten notes. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately, numbers, dates, and a note that read, "All cash offer, quick and clean." But what chilled me was the notarized document. The notary was listed as John H. Thompson, but the signature looked sloppy, unprofessional. I photographed everything, carefully put it all back, and left before they returned. I now had almost enough, but I needed to understand Brian's role. He wasn't just a beneficiary. He might have been part of the plan. I went back to his Instagram. One photo showed him with an unfamiliar man, both in front of a real estate office. I zoomed in and recognized the logo of a local real estate company. This was a lead. I visited the office, posing as a potential home buyer. The agent, a woman named Avery, was eager to assist. When I subtly steered the conversation toward the Craftsman house, she nodded. "Oh, the house on Oak Street? That was a quick deal." The seller was Brian Miller, who said his brother was moving abroad and needed to sell fast. We found a cash buyer right away. I kept my expression neutral, though rage boiled inside me. "Brian handled everything himself?" I asked. Avery nodded. He brought all the paperwork, including his brother's signature and notarized documents. We had no reason to doubt it. I left the office, my mind reeling. Brian didn't just know about the sale. He was the one who executed it. My father forged the notarization. My mother forged my signature. And Brian handled the transaction. They had worked together perfectly to steal everything from me. But they made a critical mistake. They didn't know the house was tied to the trust. And I had Mr. Harrison on my side. I contacted Mr. Harrison again, sending him all the evidence. The deed with the forged signature, the questionable notarized document, the information from the real estate agency. He reviewed it. His voice over the phone was calm but resolute. "Garrett, this is strong evidence. A forged signature and notarization are serious legal violations. We can file a lawsuit to reclaim the house and the forfeiture clause will be activated. But you need to be certain about this. Once we proceed, your family will never be the same." I fell silent, thinking of my parents, of Brian, of the family dinners that were now just memories. "They destroyed our family first, Mr. Harrison," I said. "I'm just taking back what's mine." He agreed, promising to prepare the legal documents. "Stay calm, Garrett," he said. "We'll do this the right way." When I hung up, I stood in front of the mirror in my hotel room, looking at myself. I was no longer the Garrett from 6 weeks ago, the one who believed his family would never betray him. I was someone new, forged by pain and determination. My grandfather, my rose garden, my Craftsman house. I would take it all back. Not just for me, but for the promise I kept to him. True strength lies in will. I knew I had enough evidence. But filing a lawsuit wasn't enough. I wanted my parents and Brian to face the truth in front of the entire family, in front of the relatives who had watched me grow up, who had heard my parents boast about their golden boy. I wanted them to see the consequences of their actions, not through a cold legal letter, but in person, in a moment they couldn't escape. I called Aunt Susan, my mother's older sister, who was always fair and straightforward. The only family member who had ever praised my efforts. "Aunt Susan," I said, keeping my emotions in check. "I want to organize a family gathering. Invite everyone." Aunts, uncles, cousins. I have something important to say. She hesitated, sensing the gravity in my voice. Garrett, is something wrong? I only replied, I need everyone there. I'll explain later. I borrowed Aunt Susan's house for the gathering, telling her it was a family update after my trip. I didn't reveal details, but told my mother I wanted to make peace after recent tensions. My mother, perhaps out of guilt or confidence that I had accepted the loss, agreed immediately. That's good, Garrett, she said, relieved. The family needs to come together. Brian will be happy to see his big brother. I clenched my jaw, suppressing the anger. They didn't know this gathering wasn't about reconciliation. It was about exposing the truth. I contacted Mr. Harrison, inviting him to attend as a family friend. He agreed, bringing the trust documents and the evidence I'd collected. Are you sure you want to do this in front of the whole family, Garrett? He asked, his voice low but concerned. This will be a big shock. I nodded. They chose this path, Mr. Harrison. I'm just helping them see where it leads. On the day, I arrived early to help Aunt Susan. She looked at me worried. Garrett, are you okay? You seem different. I gave her a strained smile. I'm fine, Aunt Susan. Today's an important day. Family members started arriving. Laughter and hugs filled the air, as if this were just a normal gathering. But my heart pounded like a warrior preparing for battle. My parents arrived, my father in his new shirt, my mother in a light blue dress, her smile forced but confident. Brian showed up late, strutting in with his usual smug demeanor, wearing a white linen shirt like in his Maldives photos. He clapped me on the shoulder, saying loudly, Big bro, you're back. How was Europe? Don't be mad about the house thing. Life's too long for that. I looked into his eyes, seeing his arrogance untainted by remorse. I just nodded, giving a faint smile. Yeah, Brian. Life's long. Once everyone was settled around the tables in the backyard, I stood up, holding a glass of wine, but not drinking. The lively chatter quieted. All eyes turned to me. Thank you all for coming today, I began, my voice calm but resonant. I just returned from 6 weeks in Europe. But today, I don't want to talk about work. I want to talk about family. About truth, trust, and what we do to each other. My mother looked at me, a flicker of worry in her eyes. My father crossed his arms, frowning. Brian smirked, expecting an apology. I set the wine glass down and pulled a stack of papers from my bag, copies of the forged deed, the notarized document, photos from the real estate agency. When I went on my trip, I asked my parents to look after my craftsman house, I continued, my voice slow but icy. The house I bought with my sweat, tears, and part of the funds from Grandpa Norman's trust. But when I returned, I found out my parents sold it without asking me. Murmurs rose. Aunt Susan covered her mouth, eyes wide. My mother stood up, her voice trembling. Garrett, what are you doing? This isn't the place for this. I raised a hand, gesturing for her to sit. No, Mom. This is exactly the place. Everyone needs to know the truth. I held up the papers. This is the deed of transfer for the house. It has my signature, but I didn't sign it. This is a notarized document, signed by someone named John H. Thompson, but the signature is fake. And this, I pulled out my phone, showing the photo of Brian in front of the real estate office, is proof that Brian facilitated the sale, lying that I was moving abroad for work. The air grew heavy. Brian's face paled, and he forced a laugh. What? What are you making up, Garrett? Don't blow this out of proportion. I locked eyes with him, feeling all my pain and anger surge. Making it up? Let Mr. Harrison explain. I gestured to Mr. Harrison, who had been sitting quietly. He stood, holding the trust documents, his voice low but commanding. I am the attorney managing the Norman Miller Trust, he began. The Craftsman House belongs to the trust, with Garrett as the sole trustee. Selling it without his consent was illegal. But more critically, the trust has a clear clause. Anyone who forges, misappropriates, or sells trust assets will immediately forfeit their inheritance. Gasps echoed around the table. My mother covered her face. My father sat frozen, his hands trembling. Brian slammed the table, shouting, What? What are you talking about? It's just an old house. Mr. Harrison looked at him, his voice cold. Not just the house, Mr. Bryan. You and your parents have forfeited $500,000 each from the trust, a total of $1 million, plus the vacation cabin in Big Bear. Furthermore, forging signatures and notarizations is a criminal offense. You will face legal consequences. Silence fell, broken only by the soft rustle of the wind. My mother clutched her face, stifling sobs. My father approached Mr. Harrison, demanding to see the trust documents. Bryan slammed the table again, yelling what? Grandpa had that much money and left it all to Garrett. Why didn't anyone tell me? He turned to me, eyes bloodshot. Garrett, you knew about this and said nothing. How selfish are you? I looked at Bryan, feeling like I was staring at a spoiled child. Selfish, I replied, my voice calm but sharp as a blade. I worked my whole life to prove I was worthy of Grandpa's trust. You, Bryan, only took handouts from Mom and Dad, living off deceit. Grandpa put me in charge of the trust because he believed I'd use it wisely. And now, you've all stripped yourselves of your own inheritance. My mother rushed to me, grabbing my hand, tears streaming down her face. Garrett, I'm sorry. I didn't know about the trust. I just wanted to help Bryan. You're his big brother. You can forgive us, right? You can share the inheritance as planned. My father turned, his voice hoarse. Garrett, we're family. You can't let us lose everything like this. Think it over. Bryan jumped in, almost pleading. Big bro, please think it over. $2 million in inheritance isn't small. I looked at them. My mother with tear-filled eyes, my father with a defeated expression, Bryan with his childish anger. Part of me wanted to forgive, to hug my mother and say everything would be okay. But then I remembered my rose garden, my craftsman house, and my grandfather's words, your strength is your true asset. They had chosen to betray me. Chosen Bryan over justice. You're not my family, I said, my voice calm but cutting. Family doesn't steal each other's dreams. My mother collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. My father held her, unable to meet my eyes. Bryan stormed out, muttering curses. The other family members looked at me. Some nodded. Others quietly left. Aunt Susan came to my side, placing a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, Garrett, she said. Your grandfather would be proud. As everyone left, I stood in the backyard, watching the sunset paint the Pasadena sky golden. Mr. Harrison patted my shoulder. You did what you had to, he said. The legal documents are ready. We'll reclaim your house, and they'll pay the price. I nodded, but inside, I didn't feel victorious. There was only an emptiness where my love for my family once was. In the days following that gathering, I felt like I was living in a whirlwind. Mr. Harrison and his legal team sprang into action, filing a lawsuit with serious charges, forged signatures, fraudulent notarization, misappropriation of trust assets. I spent hours in his office, reviewing every document, every piece of evidence. Each one was a knife reminding me of the betrayal, but also a step toward justice. The police moved quickly. One morning, Mr. Harrison called. Garrett, they've opened a criminal investigation. Your parents and Bryan have been summoned for questioning. I sat down, my hands trembling. Images of my mother sobbing, my father's bowed head, Bryan storming off, flashed through my mind. I didn't want them to go to jail, but I couldn't let them escape the consequences either. What will they be charged with? I asked. Mr. Harrison's tone was steady. Your parents face charges of forgery and fraud. Bryan is being charged with complicity and profiting from criminal proceeds. We have solid evidence. I nodded. What about my house? He reassured me. We're working with the buyers, Ellen and George. They're victims, too. The court may void the sale and refund their money. You'll get your house back, but it will take a few months. I hung up, staring out the window. The Pasadena sunlight was as radiant as the day I returned, but it no longer felt warm. The investigation moved faster than I expected. The officer, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, took meticulous notes. We've checked the notarized document, he said. The person listed as John H. Thompson doesn't exist in the notary registry. The signature on the deed of transfer has also been confirmed as forged through handwriting analysis. A jolt ran through me. What does that mean? I asked. The officer looked at me, his voice firm. Your parents will be charged with forgery and fraud. They could face probation and restitution. Your brother Brian will be charged with complicity, and he'll have to repay all the money he used from the house sale, including the costs of his Maldives trip. I left the police station, my mind reeling. Probation, restitution, repayment. The words echoed like a grim song. I didn't want my family destroyed. But I couldn't forgive them either. They had chosen this path, chosen to steal my dream, to feed Brian's laziness. I thought of my grandfather, of his words, your strength is your true asset. He was right. My strength wasn't in the house. It was in my determination to seek justice. In the weeks that followed, my family unraveled. My parents were formally charged, receiving 3 years of probation and a substantial restitution order, mostly the money they'd gained from selling my house. They were forced to mortgage their own Pasadena home to cover the debt. Aunt Susan told me my mother cried every night, while my father barely spoke, sitting silently in front of the TV. Brian faced harsher consequences. The court ordered him to repay the full cost of his Maldives trip, over $20,000, and fined him for complicity. With no more financial support from our parents and no trust fund, Brian was left to face reality. No job, no home, and a massive debt. I saw him once, passing by a coffee shop in downtown Pasadena. He was sitting there in a crumpled t-shirt, eyes shadowed, talking on the phone about job applications. When he saw me, he turned away, unable to meet my gaze. I didn't stop. I had nothing left to say to him. After 5 long months, I received news from Mr. Harrison. The court had voided the sale of the Craftsman house. Ellen and George were refunded, and the house was officially returned to my name. The day I received the keys, I stood in front of the house, a mix of joy and sorrow washing over me. The stained glass windows were still there, but the rose garden had withered from neglect. I stepped inside. The familiar smell of wood filled my senses, but it wasn't the same. The house had once been my dream, but now it carried the scars of betrayal. I spent days cleaning and restoring, trying to bring back its old beauty. But every crack in the wall, every chipped brick, reminded me of what I'd lost. Not just property, but my trust in my family. I stood in the backyard, looking at the wilted rose bushes, wondering if I could revive them, or if I could revive myself. My family was no longer what it was. Aunt Susan stayed in touch, but other relatives drifted away. My parents tried to reach out, leaving voicemails with apologies, but I didn't respond. It wasn't that I didn't want to forgive. It was that I wasn't ready. Maybe one day. Brian disappeared from my radar. I heard he'd moved to another city, working odd jobs to pay off his debt. Part of me felt sorry, but a larger part reminded me he chose this path. He could have grown up, stood on his own, but instead, he chose deceit. I sat on the porch of my Craftsman house, a cold cup of coffee in my hand. The house was mine again, but it wasn't the place I'd once dreamed of. It was a trophy, a testament to my will, but also a reminder of the cost of justice. I thought of my grandfather, the trust, how he'd protected me even after he was gone. I wondered if he knew that one day I'd need the strength he'd instilled in me. I stood up, walked to the backyard, and began pulling weeds, watering the surviving rose bushes. Maybe they'd bloom again. Maybe not. But I would try, as I always had. Justice had been served, but my journey wasn't over. I would rebuild, not just the house, but my life, one step at a time. While restoring the house, I started thinking about the trust fund, the $1 million I would receive when I turned 35, now just a few months away. My parents and Brian had forfeited their inheritance, and that $1.5 million, along with the vacation cabin, now belonged to me. But I didn't want to keep it all. My grandfather had taught me that true wealth lies not in money, but in what you leave behind for the world. I decided to establish the Norman Miller Foundation, a scholarship fund for young people who, like me 20 years ago, worked tirelessly and counted every penny to pursue their dreams. I used a portion of the trust fund to launch it, providing tuition assistance for students facing hardship but with strong determination. As I signed the paperwork in Mr. Harrison's office, I felt my grandfather's presence, as if he were there, smiling. Well done, Garrett, I imagined him saying. This is true strength. The scholarship fund quickly gained attention. Local newspapers ran stories calling me the man who turned pain into hope. I didn't care for the spotlight, but I was proud when I received thank you letters from students. One girl wrote, "Thank you, Garrett. Because of your scholarship, I can continue college and become a doctor." Reading those words, I felt that my craftsman house, my rose garden, and even my scars had meaning. My family became a distant memory. I heard they moved to a small apartment in the suburbs, living quietly. My mother once sent me a handwritten letter, her shaky handwriting filled with remorse. "Garrett, I'm sorry. I only wanted to help Brian, but I was wrong. If you can forgive me, I'm willing to do anything." I read it, left it on the table for days, but didn't respond. I didn't know how to mend what had been shattered. Brian, I heard, was living alone, withdrawn, changed after losing his inheritance. I didn't know if he was truly remorseful, but I hoped, for his own sake, he would find his path. One afternoon, I sat on the porch of my craftsman house, a hot cup of coffee in hand, gazing at the rose garden. It was blooming vibrantly again. The red petals glowed under the sunlight, a reminder that life could be revived even after the deepest wounds. This house, once a symbol of my dream, was now a symbol of resilience. I had lost my family, but I had found the strength my grandfather always believed I possessed. I reflected on my journey, from the shock of discovering my house had been sold, to the quiet days of investigation, to the moment I confronted my parents and Brian in front of the family. Forging signatures to steal property isn't uncommon, and the most painful part is when it comes from those closest to you. But my story is proof that justice and truth always find a way to prevail. My parents and Brian paid a price, not just in money, but in honor and trust. I wasn't happy about it, but I didn't regret standing up for myself. I stood up, went inside, and took an old framed photo of my grandfather, placing it on the fireplace. He was smiling in the picture, his eyes bright, as if he knew I would overcome. "Thank you, Grandpa," I whispered. Then I returned to the garden, picked up the watering can, and continued tending to the surviving rose bushes. My life, like this garden, would keep blooming. Not because I had everything, but because I never gave up. So, I've shared my story. It was one of the hardest things I've ever been through. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever faced such a profound betrayal from family, or had to fight for what you believed was yours? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.